Okay, this is the last content of the first years of floating rates, 1973 to 1919. I guess at March 1973, the floating exchange rate system was conducted. So late 1973 to 74, oil shock quadruples world market price of oil. So consumption and investment slow down in all regions. The world economy goes to recession, and current account deficits in oil importing countries. The oil shock hits the world in 1973 to 1974. 1974 to 1975, stagflation suffered in the world, stagflation all over the world. So stagflation is the situation that is economic stagnation and inflation. So inflation occur and economic stagnation occur. So this is stagflation. Rising commodity, so this is due to the rising commodity prices rising commodity prices. So such rising commodity prices intensified inflation, and the aggregate demand and the supply fell. High inflation expectations occur. So against this stagflation, U.S. government, U.S. Federal Reserve conduct expansionary monetary policy, and then U.S. interest rate fell. Since 1976, the significant depreciation of the dollar occurred due to the interest rate fall in the U.S. Okay, so now I want to introduce the Phillips curve. The Phillips curve is the relationship between inflation rate pi and unemployment rate u, like that. Pi equal to pi e minus theta u minus un. So pi e is expected inflation. Un is the natural employment rate. So under the constant expected inflation rate falls as employment rate increases, and also inflation rate rises as the employment rate decreases. So this is actual Phillips curve in Japan and the US. The left panel shows Japanese Phillips curve, and the right panel shows that US Phillips curve. In both panels, horizontal axis is unemployment rate, and vertical axis is wage inflation. So in here, we use wage inflation, but just consider like normal inflation rate. Okay, you can see that unemployment rate in Japan is 0 to 6. So therefore, unemployment rate in Japan is at most 6%. In the US, the horizontal axis is 3% to 12%. So therefore, unemployment rate in the US is higher than in Japan. So like at about twice larger as Japan. If we see the vertical axis, then wage inflation in Japan is minus 5% to 35%. And in the US is 0% to 10%. So therefore, about wage inflation, the Japan faces higher wage inflation than the US. And also the purple triangle one is the 1970s, and the green one is 1980 past 1980s, and blue circle is 1990s, and red plus is 2000, since the 2000. You can see that in Japan faces large wage inflation in the 1970s. But after the 1970s, inflation is relatively low. And if we see this graph, you can see that there is a downward sloping relationship between wage inflation and unemployment rate. So this is consistent to the flipped curve we reviewed in the previous slide. So under the constant expected inflation rate falls as the unemployment rate increases. So therefore, like Japanese case, unemployment rate decreases as unemployment rate increases as inflation decreases. So there is a downward sloping relationship. Okay. But when we look at the US case, the relationship between wage inflation and unemployment rate is unclear. So there is unclear relationship between wage inflation and unemployment rate. But if we draw a line around here, then there is a region that is far away from the line. So if we draw a line around here, then there is a region around here. So which is far away from this line. Okay, this line is Phillips curve, the negative relationship between unemployment rate and inflation. So there is a region far away from the Phillips curve, and this region is concentrated on the 1970s and 1980s. What was happened? So in the 1970s, you already know that oil shock and stagflation occur. Then oil shock increases the inflation rate. So the higher inflation and stagflation causes the huge economic recession. So therefore, unemployment rate increases. So both high unemployment rate and high inflation rate occurred in 1970s. And also in 1980, the second oil shock occurred. So therefore, inflation goes up and also unemployment goes up. So therefore, around the 1970s and around the 1980s, so the wage inflation also high and also unemployment rate also high. So this around here, around 1970 and around 1980, the Phillips curve, there is, so the economy is far away from the Phillips curve. Okay. Okay, let's continue the first year of floating rates. October 1979, Federal Reserve Chairman Volcker tightened the monetary policy. Then interest rate, US interest rate rise, and dollar appreciate. In 1979, another oil shock hits the world, and the world becomes in recession. Countries regulate monetary supply growth and halt inflation instead of expansionary monetary policies. So the central bank tried to fight with inflation, not fight with unemployment rate. So therefore, they conduct inflation cutting monetary policy instead of expansionary monetary policies, because expansionary monetary policies tends to increase inflation. So therefore, more severe recession occurred around the world. In 1980 and 1981, interest rate rise and the economy slumps and deep recession endures. In 1981, the US President Reagan promotes increased defense spending. So the US budget deficit increases, rapid fiscal stimulus occurred. US aggregate demand increases due to the large deficit in the US budget. Import increases and dollar appreciates. Then, US import promotion leads to a world economic recovery, but rapid deterioration of the US current account balance. So, in such import promotion becomes discontent among the US exporters, and also the risk of dollar collapse due to the concerns about the US debt repayment occurred. In September 22, in 1985, this is not a record. So Plaza Record is signed. So this is coordinated market intervention by the US, UK, France, Germany, and Japan. Then, due to the Plaza Record, the dollar depreciates. So this is the first year of floating rates. Okay, so this is the end of our lecture. So what is the confidence problem of the US dollar? So the US dollar is just a paper, but backed by the gold. So gold have actual value. So but the Roberto Triffin pointed out the US gold will be short if many countries keep holding dollar and increases dollar holdings. So this is confidence problem of the US dollar. So why was the floating exchange rate system supported? So floating rate system has 4 advantages: monetary policy autonomy, symmetry, exchange rate as an automatic stabilizer, and also exchange rate and exchange rate balance as a balancer of external balance. Okay, what was happened in the world of economy since the change to a floating exchange rate system? So when the world moves to the floating exchange rate systems, there are several recessions and economic crisis. The first one is oil shock, And the second one is stagflation due to the oil shock. And also the tightness of monetary policy and another oil shock and higher interest rate around the world. And also, President Reagan's promotion of defense spending. And also in 1985, Plaza Accord was signed. Okay, this is the end of the lecture. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. See you next time. Bye.